After dinner came Cattell, Eggers, Senf, Wolf, then a painter, and then 2 more, and others. I played the piano, and they asked for pieces by Sebastian Bach, so I played numbers of his compositions, which were much admired. I also explained clearly to them the mode in which the Passion is executed, for they seemed scarcely to believe it. Bunsen possesses it, arranged for the piano, he showed it to the papal singers, and they said before witnesses that such music could not possibly be executed by human voices. I think the contrary. It seems, however, that Trautwein is about to publish the score of the Passion of St. John. I suppose I must order a set of studs for Paris, à la bac. Today Bunsen is to take me to Bainey's, whom he has not seen for a year, as he never goes out except to hear confessions. I am glad to know him, and shall endeavour to improve my intimacy with him, for he can solve many an enigma for me. Old Santini continues as kind as ever. When we are together in society, if I praise any particular piece or am not acquainted with it, next morning he is sure to knock gently at my door, and to bring me the piece in question carefully wrapped up in a blue pocket handkerchief. I, in return, accompany him home every evening, and we have a great regard for each other. He also brought me his Te Deum, written in 8 parts, requesting me to correct some of the modulations, as G major predominates too much, so I mean to try if I cannot introduce some A minor or E minor. I am now very anxious to become acquainted with a good many Italians. I visit at the house of a certain Maestro di San Giovanni Laterano, whose daughters are musical, but not pretty, so this does not count for much. If therefore you can send me letters, pray do so. I work in the morning, at noon I see and admire, and thus the day glides away till sunset, but I should like in the evening to associate with the Roman world. My kind English friends have arrived from Venice. Lord Harrowby and his family are to pass the winter here. Shadow, Benderman, Bunsen, Tippleskirch, all receive every evening. In short, I have no lack of acquaintances, but I should like to know some Italians also. The present, dear Fanny, that I have prepared for your birthday, is a psalm, for chorus and orchestra, non nobis, domin. You know the melody well, there is an air in it which has a good ending, and the last chorus will I hope please you. I hear that next week I shall have an opportunity of sending it to you, along with a quantity of new music. I intend now to finish my overture, and then, D.V., to proceed with my symphony. A pianoforte concerto, too, that I wish to write for Paris, begins to float in my head. If Providence kindly bestows on me success and bright days, I hope we shall enjoy them together. Farewell. May you be happy. Felix. Rome, November 22nd, 1830. My dear brother and sisters. You know how much I dislike, at a distance of 200 miles, and 14 days' journey from you, to offer good advice. I mean to do so, however, for once. Let me tell you therefore of a mistake in your conduct, and in truth the same that I once made myself. I do assure you that never in my life have I known my father write in so irritable a strain as since I came to Rome, and so I wish to ask you if you cannot devise some domestic recipe to cheer him a little. I mean by forbearance and yielding to his wishes, and in this manner, by allowing my father's view of any subject to predominate over your own, then, not to speak at all on topics that irritate him, and instead of saying shameful, say unpleasant, or instead of superb, very fair. This method has often a wonderfully good effect, and I put it, with all submission to yourselves, whether it might not be equally successful in this case. For, with the exception of the great events of the world, ill humour often seems to me to proceed from the same cause that my father's did when I chose to pursue my own path in my musical studies. He was then in a constant state of irritation, incessantly abusing Beethoven and all visionaries, and this often vexed me very much, and made me sometimes very unamiable. At that very time something new came out, which put my father out of sorts, and made him I believe not a little uneasy. So long therefore as I persisted in extolling and exalting my Beethoven, the evil became daily worse, and one day, if I remember rightly, I was even sent out of the room. At last, however, it occurred to me that I might speak a great deal of truth, and yet avoid the particular truth obnoxious to my father, so the aspect of affairs speedily began to improve, and soon all went well. Perhaps you may have in some degree forgotten that you ought now and then to be forbearing, and not aggressive. My father considers himself both much older and more irritable than, thank God, he really is, but it is our duty always to submit our opinion to his, even if the truth be as much on our side, as it often is on his, when opposed to us. Strive, then, to praise what he likes, and do not attack what is implanted in his heart, more especially ancient established ideas. Do not commend what is new till it has made some progress in the world, and acquired a name, for till then it is a mere matter of taste. Try to draw my father into your circle, and be playful and kind to him. In short, try to smooth and to equalize things, and remember that I, who am now an experienced man of the world, never yet knew any family, taking into due consideration all defects and failings, who have hitherto lived so happily together as ours. Do not send me any answer to this, for you will not receive it for a month, and by that time no doubt some fresh topic will have arisen. Besides, if I have spoken nonsense, I do not wish to be scolded by you, and if I have spoken properly, I hope you will follow my good advice. November 23rd. Just as I was going to set to work at the Hebrides, arrived Herr B., a musical professor from Magdeburg. He played me over a whole book of songs, and an Ave Maria, and begged to have the benefit of my opinion. I seemed in the position of a juvenile Nestor, and made him some insipid speeches, but this caused me the loss of a morning in Rome, which is a pity. The choral, Mitten wir im Leben sind, is finished, and is certainly one of the best sacred pieces that I have yet composed. After I have completed the Hebrides, I think of arranging Handel's Solomon for future performance, with proper curtailments, etc. I then purpose writing the Christmas music of Vom Himmel hoch, and the symphony in a minor, perhaps also some pieces for the piano, and a concerto, etc., just as they come into my head. I own I do sadly miss some friend to whom I could communicate my new works, and who could examine the score along with me, and play a bass or a flute, whereas now when a piece is finished I must lay it aside in my desk without its giving pleasure to any one. London spoiled me in this respect. I can never again expect to meet altogether such friends as I had there. Here I can only say the half of what I think, and leave the best half unspoken, whereas there it was not necessary to say more than the half, because the other half was a mere matter of course, and already understood. Still, this is a most delightful place. We young people went lately to Albano, and set off in the most lovely weather. The road to Frascati passed under the great aqueduct, its dark brown outline standing out sharply defined against the clear blue sky. Thence we proceeded to the monastery at Grotta Ferrata, where there are some beautiful frescoes by Domenichino, then to Marino, very picturesquely situated on a hill, and proceeding along the margin of the lake we reached Castel Gandolfo. The scenery, like my first impression of Italy, is by no means so striking or so wonderfully beautiful as is generally supposed, but most pleasing and gratifying to the eye, and the outlines undulating and picturesque, forming a perfect whole, with its entourage and distribution of light. Here I must deliver a eulogy on monks. They finish a picture at once, giving it tone and colour, with their wide loose gowns, their pious meditative gait, and their dark aspect. A beautiful shady avenue of evergreen oaks runs along the lake from Castel Gandolfo to Albano, where monks of every order are swarming, animating the scenery and yet marking its solitude. Near the city a couple of begging monks were walking together, further on, a whole troop of young Jesuits. Then we saw an elegant young priest in a thicket reading. Beyond this 2 more were standing in the wood with their guns, watching for birds. Then we came to a monastery, encircled by a number of small chapels. At last all was solitude, but at that moment appeared a dirty, stupid-looking Capuchin laden with huge nosegays, which he placed before the various shrines, kneeling down in front of them before proceeding to decorate them. As we passed on, we met 2 old prelates engaged in eager conversation. The bell for Vespers was ringing in the monastery of Albano, and even on the summit of the highest hill stands a Passionist convent, where they are only permitted to speak for a single hour daily, and occupy themselves solely in reading the history of the Passion of Christ. In Albano, among girls with pitchers on their heads, vendors of flowers and vegetables, and all the crowd and tumult, we saw a coal-black dumb monk, returning to Monte Carvo, who formed a singular contrast to the rest of the scene. They seem to have taken entire possession of all this splendid country, and form a strange melancholy ground tone for all that is lively, gay, and free, and the ever-living cheerfulness bestowed by nature. It is as if men, on that very account, required a counterpoise. This is not however my case, and I need no contrast to enable me to enjoy what I see. I am often with Bunsen, and as he likes to turn the conversation on the subject of his liturgy and its musical portions, which I consider very deficient, I am perfectly plain-spoken, and give him a straightforward opinion, and I believe this is the only way to establish a mutual understanding. We have had several long, serious discussions, and I hope we shall eventually know each other better. Yesterday Palestrina's music was performed at Bunsen's house, as on every Monday, and then for the first time I played before the Roman musicians in corpore. I am quite aware of the necessity in every foreign city of playing so as to make myself understood by the audience. This makes me usually feel rather embarrassed, and such was the case with me yesterday. After the papal singers finished Palestrina's music, it was my turn to play something. A brilliant piece would have been unsuitable, and there had been more than enough of serious music. I therefore begged Astolfi, the director, to give me a theme, so he lightly touched the notes with one finger, thus smiling as he did so. The black-frocked abbot pressed round me and seemed highly delighted. I observed this, and it inspirited me so much that towards the end I succeeded famously. They clapped their hands like mad, and Bunsen declared that I had astounded the clergy. In short, the affair went off well. There is no encouraging prospect of any public performance here, so society is the only resource, which is fishing in troubled waters. Yours, Felix. Rome, November 30th, 1830. To come home from Bunsen's by moonlight, with your letter in my pocket, and then to read it through leisurely at night, this is a degree of pleasure I wish many may enjoy. In all probability I shall stay here the whole winter, and not go to Naples till April. It is so delightful to look round on every side, and to appreciate it all properly. There is much that must be thought over, in order to receive a due impression from it. I have also within myself so much work requiring both quiet and industry, that I feel anything like haste would be utter destruction, and though I adhere faithfully to my system, to receive each day only one fresh image into my mind, still I am sometimes compelled even then to give myself a day of rest, that I may not become confused. I write you a short letter today, because I must for the present adhere to my work, and yet I cannot refrain from culling all the beauty that lies at my feet. The weather, too, is brutal and cold, so that I am not in a very communicative mood. The Pope is dying, or possibly dead by this time. We shall soon get a new one, say the Italians, coolly. His death will not affect the carnival, nor the church festivals, with their pomps and processions, and fine music, and as there will be in addition to these, solemn requiems, and the lying in state at St. Peter's, they care little about it, provided it does not occur in February. I am delighted to hear that Mantius sings my songs, and likes them. Give him my kind regards, and ask him why he does not perform his promise, and write to me. I have written to him repeatedly in the shape of music. In the Ave Maria, and in the chorals Laus Tifa Nath, some passages are composed expressly for him, and he will sing them charmingly. In the Ave, which is a salutation, a tenor solo takes the lead of the choir. I thought of a disciple all the time. As the piece is in A major, and goes rather high at the words Benedicta II, he must prepare his high A, it will vibrate well. Ask him to sing you a song I sent to Devrient from Venice, von Schlechtem Lebenswandel. It is expressive of mingled joy and despair, no doubt he will sing it well. Show it to no one, but confine it solely to 40 eyes. Ritz, 7, 2 never writes, and yet I am constantly longing for his violin and his depth of feeling when he plays, which all recurs to my mind when I see his welcome writing. I am now working daily at the Hebrides, and will send it to Ritz as soon as it is finished. It is quite a piece to suit him, so very singular. Next time I write I will tell you more of myself. I work hard, and lead a pleasant, happy life. My mirror is stuck full of Italian, German, and English visiting cards, and I spend every evening with one of my acquaintances. There is a truly Babylonian confusion of tongues in my head, for English, Italian, German and French are all mixed up together in it. 2 days ago I again extemporized before the papal singers. The fellows had contrived to get hold of the most strange, quaint theme for me, wishing to put my powers to the test. They call me, however, l'insuperable Professor One, and are particularly kind and friendly. I much wish to have described to you the Sunday music in the Sistina, a soirée at Tarlonia's, the Vatican, St. Onofrio, Guido's Aurora, and other small matters, but I reserve them for my next letter. The post is about to set off, and this letter with it. My good wishes are always with you, today and ever. Yours, Felix. Rome, December 7th, 1830. I cannot even today manage to write to you as fully as I wish. Heaven knows how time flies here. I was introduced this week to several agreeable English families, and so I have the prospect of many pleasant evenings this winter. I am much with Bunsen. I intend also to cultivate Bainey. I think he conceives me to be only a brutissimo tedesco, so that I have a famous opportunity of becoming well acquainted with him. His compositions are certainly of no great value, and the same may be said of the whole music here. The wish is not wanting, but the means do not exist. The orchestra is below contempt. MDLEM. Carl, 8, who is engaged as prima donna assoluta for the season, at both the principal theatres here, is now arrived, and begins to make la pluie at le beau temps. The papal singers even are becoming old, they are almost all unmusical, and do not execute even the most established pieces in tune. The whole choir consists of 32 singers, but that number are rarely together. Concerts are given by the so-called Philharmonic Society, but only with the piano. There is no orchestra, and when recently they wished to perform Haydn's Creation, the instrumentalists declared it was impossible to play it. The sounds they bring out of their wind instruments are such as in Germany we have no conception of. The Pope is dead, and the conclave assembles on the 14th. A great part of the winter will be occupied with the ceremonies of his funeral, and the enthronement of the new Pope. All music therefore and large parties must be at an end, so I very much doubt whether I shall be able to undertake any public performance during my stay here, but I do not regret this, for there are so many varied objects to enjoy inwardly, that my dwelling on these and meditating on them is no disadvantage. The performance of Graun's Passion in Naples, and more especially the translation of Sebastian Bach's, prove that the good cause is sure eventually to make its way, though it will neither kindle enthusiasm, nor will it be appreciated. It is no worse, however, with regard to music, in fact, rather better, than with their estimate of every other branch of the fine arts, for when some of Raphael's loggie are with inconceivable recklessness and disgraceful barbarism actually defaced, to give place to inscriptions in pencil, when the lower parts of the arabesques are totally destroyed, because Italians with knives, and heaven knows what else besides, inscribe their insignificant names there, when one person painted in large letters. Under the Apollo Belvedere, Christ, when an altar has been erected in front of Michelangelo's Last Judgment, so large that it hides the center of the picture, thus destroying the whole effect, when cattle are driven through the splendid saloons of the Villa Madama, the walls of which are painted by Giulio Romano, and fodder is stored in them, simply from indifference towards the beautiful, all this is certainly much worse than a bad orchestra, and painters must be even more distressed by such things than I am by their miserable music. The fact is, that the people are mentally enervated and apathetic. They have a religion, but they do not believe in it, they have a pope and a government, but they turn them into ridicule, they can recall a brilliant and heroic past, but they do not value it. It is thus no marvel that they do not delight in art, for they are indifferent to all that is earnest. It is really quite revolting to see their unconcern about the death of the Pope, and their unseemly merriment during the ceremonies. I myself saw the corpse lying in state, and the priest standing round incessantly whispering and laughing, and at this moment, when masses are being said for his soul, they are in the very same church hammering away at the scaffolding of the catafalque, so that the strokes of the hammers and the noise of the workpeople entirely prevent any one hearing the religious services. As soon as the cardinals assemble in conclave, satires appear against them, where, for instance, they parody the litanies, and instead of praying to be delivered from each particular sin, they name the bad qualities of each well-known cardinal, or, again, they perform an entire opera where all the characters are cardinals, one being the primo amoroso, another the tyranno assoluto, a third, stage candle snuffer, etc. This could not be the case where the people took any pleasure in art. Formerly it was no better, but they had faith then, and it is this which makes the difference. Nature, however, and the genial December atmosphere, and the outlines of the Alban hills, stretching as far as the sea, all remain unchanged. There they can scribble no names, or compose no inscriptions. These every one can still individually enjoy in all their freshness, and to these I cling. I feel much the want of a friend here, to whom I could freely unbosom myself, who could read my music as I write it, thus making it doubly precious in my eyes, in whose society I could feel an interest, and enjoy repose, and honestly learn from him. It would not require a very wise man for this purpose. But just as trees are not ordained to grow up into the sky, so probably such a man is not likely to be found here, and the good fortune I have hitherto so richly enjoyed elsewhere is not to fall to my share at present, so I must hum over my melodies to myself, and I dare say I shall do well enough. Felix. Rome, December 10th, 1830. Dear Father, it is a year this very day since we kept your birthday at Hensel's, and now let me give you some account of Rome, as I did at that time of London. I intend to finish my overture to the Einsame Insel 9 as a present to you, and if I write under it the 11th of December, when I take up the sheets I shall feel as if I were about to place them in your hands. You would probably say that you could not read them, but still I should have offered you the best it was in my power to give, and though I desire to do this every day, still there is a peculiar feeling connected with a birthday. Would I were with you! I need not offer you my good wishes, for you know them all already, and the deep interest I, and all of us, take in your happiness and welfare, and that we cannot wish any good for you, that is not reflected doubly on ourselves. Today is a holiday. I rejoice in thinking how cheerful you are at home, and when I repeat to you how happily I live here, I feel as if this were also a felicitation. A period like this, when serious thought and enjoyment are combined, is indeed most cheering and invigorating. Every time I enter my room I rejoice that I am not obliged to pursue my journey on the following day, and that I may quietly postpone many things till the morrow, that I am in Rome. Hitherto much that passed through my brain was swept away by fresh ideas, each new impression chasing away the previous one, while here, on the contrary, they are all in turn properly developed. I never remember having worked with so much zeal, and if I am to complete all that I have projected, I must be very industrious during the winter. I am indeed deprived of the great delight of showing my finished compositions to one who could take pleasure in them, and enter into them along with me, but this impels me to return to my labours, which please me most when I am fairly in the midst of them. And now this must be combined with the various solemnities, and festivals of every kind, which are to supplant my work for a few days, and as I have resolved to see and to enjoy all I possibly can, I do not allow my occupation to prevent this, and shall then return with fresh zeal to my composition. This is indeed a delightful existence. My health is as good as possible, though the hot wind, called here the sirocco, rather attacks my nerves, and I find I must beware of playing the piano much, or at night. Besides, it is easy for me to refrain from doing so for a few days, as for some weeks past I have been playing almost every evening. Bunsen, who often warns me against playing if I find it prejudicial, gave a large party yesterday, where nevertheless I was obliged to play, but it was a pleasure to me, for I had the opportunity of making so many agreeable acquaintances. For Wilson, in particular, expressed himself in so gratifying a manner with regard to me, that I felt quite proud, for I honor him as one of the greatest of men, and always have revered him. He looks like a lion, and the very sight of his face is invigorating. You feel at once that he must be a noble artist, his eyes look so clear, as if with him every object must assume a definite form and image. Moreover, he is very gentle, and kind, and mild, because his nature is so superior, and yet he seems to be able to enjoy every trifle. It is a real source of pleasure to see a great man, and to know that the creator of works that will endure forever stands before you in person, a living being with all his attributes, and individuality, and genius, and yet a man like others. December 11th, morning. Now your actual birthday is arrived. A few lines of music suggested themselves to me on the occasion, and though they may not be worth much, the congratulations I have been in the habit of offering were of quite as little value. Fanny may add the second part. I have only written what occurred to my mind as I entered the room. The sun shining, on your birthday. Bunsen has just been here, and begs me to send you his best regards and congratulations. He is all kindness and courtesy towards me, and as you wish to know, I think I may say that we suit each other remarkably well. The few words you wrote about P. recalled him to my memory in all his offensiveness. The Abate Santini ought to be an obscure man compared with him, for he never attempts to magnify his own importance by impertinence or self-sufficiency. P is one of those collectors who make learning and libraries distasteful to others by their narrow-mindedness, whereas Santini is a genuine collector, in the best sense of the word, caring little whether his collection be of much value in a pecuniary point of view. He therefore gives everything away indiscriminately, and is only anxious to procure something new, for his chief object is the diffusion and universal knowledge of ancient music. I have not seen him lately, as every morning now he figures, ex officio, in his violet gown at St. Peter's, but if he has made use of some ancient text, he will say so without scruple, as he has no wish to be thought the first discoverer. He is, in fact, a man of limited capacity, and this I consider great praise in a certain sense, for though he is neither a musical nor any other luminary, and even bears some resemblance to Lessing's inquisitive friar, still he knows how to confine himself within his own sphere. Music itself does not interest him much, if he can only have it on his shelves, and he is, and esteems himself to be, simply a quiet, zealous collector. I must admit that he is fatiguing, and not altogether free from irritability, still I love any one who adopts and perseveres in some particular pursuit, prosecuting it to the best of his ability, and endeavoring to perfect it for the benefit of mankind, and I think every one ought to esteem him just the same, whether he chance to be tiresome or agreeable. I wish you would read this aloud to P. It always makes me furious when men who have no pursuit presume to criticize those who wish to effect something, even on a small scale, so on this very account I took the liberty of rebuking lately a certain musician in society here. He began to speak of Mozart, and as Bunsen and his sister love Palestrina, he tried to flatter their tastes by asking me, for instance, what I thought of the worthy Mozart, and all his sins. I however replied, that so far as I was concerned, I should feel only too happy to renounce all my virtues in exchange for Mozart's sins, but that of course I could not venture to pronounce on the extent of his virtues. The people all laughed, and were highly amused. How strange it is that such persons should feel no awe of so great a name. It is some consolation, however, that it is the same in every sphere of art, as the painters here are quite as bad. They are most formidable to look at, sitting in their Café Greco. I scarcely ever go there, for I dislike both them and their favourite places of resort. It is a small dark room, about 8 feet square, where on one side you may smoke, but not on the other, so they sit round on benches, with their broad-leaved hats on their heads, and their huge mastiffs beside them, their cheeks and throats, and the whole of their faces covered with hair, puffing forth clouds of smoke, only on one side of the room, and saying rude things to each other, while the mastiffs swarm with vermin. A neckcloth or a coat would be quite innovations. Any portion of the face visible through the beard is hid by spectacles, so they drink coffee, and speak of Titian and Pordenone, just as if they were sitting beside them, and also wore beards and wide awakes. Moreover, they paint such sickly Madonnas and feeble saints, and such milksop heroes, that I feel the strongest inclination to knock them down. These infernal critics do not even shrink from discussing Titian's picture in the Vatican, about which you asked me. They say that it has neither subject nor meaning, yet it never seems to occur to them, that a master who had so long studied a picture with due love and reverence, must have had quite as deep an insight into the subject as they are likely to have, even with their coloured spectacles. And if in the course of my life I accomplish nothing but this, I am at all events determined to say the most harsh and cutting things to those who show no reverence towards their masters, and then I shall at least have performed one good work. But there they stand, and see all the splendour of those creations, so far transcending their own conceptions, and yet dare to criticize them. In this picture there are 3 stages, or whatever they are called, the same as in the Transfiguration. Below, saints and martyrs are represented in suffering and abasement, on every face is depicted sadness, nay almost impatience. One figure in rich episcopal robes looks upwards, with the most eager and agonized longing, as if weeping, but he cannot see all that is floating above his head, but which we see, standing in front of the picture. Above, Mary and her child are in a cloud, radiant with joy, and surrounded by angels, who have woven many garlands. The Holy Child holds one of these, and seems as if about to crown the saints beneath, but his mother withholds his hand for the moment. The contrast between the pain and suffering below, when Saint Sebastian looks forth out of the picture with such gloom and almost apathy, and the lofty unalloyed exultation in the clouds above, where crowns and palms are already awaiting him, is truly admirable. High above the group of Mary, hovers the Holy Spirit, from whom emanates a bright streaming light, thus forming the apex of the whole composition. I have just remembered that Goethe, at the beginning of his first visit to Rome, describes and admires this picture, but I no longer have the book to enable me to read it over, and to compare my description with his. He speaks of it in considerable detail. It was at that time in the Quirinal, and subsequently transferred to the Vatican. Whether it was painted on a given subject, as some allege, or not, is of no moment. Titian has imbued it with his genius and his poetical feeling, and has thus made it his own. I like Shadow much, and am often with him, on every occasion, and especially in his own department. He is mild and clear judging, doing justice with due modesty to all that is truly great. He recently said that Titian had never painted an indifferent or an uninteresting picture, and I believe he is right, for life and enthusiasm and the soundest vigor are displayed in all his productions, and where these are, it is good to be also. There is one singular and fortunate peculiarity here, though all the objects have been, 1,000 times over, described, discussed, copied, and criticized, in praise or blame, by the greatest masters, and the most insignificant scholars, cleverly or stupidly, still they never fail to make a fresh and sublime impression on all, affecting each person according to his own individuality. Here we can take refuge from man in all that surrounds us. In Berlin it is often exactly the reverse. I have this moment received your letter of the 27th, and am pleased to find that I have already answered many of the questions it contains. There is no hurry about the letters I asked for, as I have now made almost more acquaintances than I wish. Besides, late hours, and playing so much, do not suit me in Rome, so I can await the arrival of these letters very patiently. It was not so at the time I urged you to send them. I cannot, however, understand what you mean by your allusion to coteries, which I ought to have outgrown, for I know that I, and all of us, invariably dreaded and detested what is usually so called, that is, a 85 frivolous, exclusive circle of society, clinging to empty outward forms. Among persons, however, who daily meet, while their mutual objects of interest remain the same, who have no sympathy with public life, and this is certainly the case in Berlin, with the exception of the theatre, it is not unnatural that they should form for themselves a gay, cheerful, and original mode of treating passing events, and that this should give rise to a peculiar, and perhaps monotonous style of conversation. But this by no means constitutes a coterie. I feel convinced that I shall never belong to one, whether I am in Rome or Wittenberg. I am glad that the last words I was writing when your letter arrived chanced to be that in Berlin you must take refuge in society from all that surrounds you, thus proving that I had no spirit of coterie, which invariably estranges men from each other. I should deeply regret your observing anything of the kind in me or in any of us, except indeed for the moment. Forgive me, my dear father, for defending myself so warmly, but this word is most repugnant to my feelings, and you say in your letters that I am always to speak out what I think in a straightforward manner, so pray do not take this amiss. I was in St. Peter's today, where the grand solemnities called the absolutions have begun for the Pope, and which last till Tuesday, when the cardinals assemble in conclave. The building surpasses all powers of description. It appears to me like some great work of nature, a forest, a mass of rocks, or something similar, for I never can realize the idea that it is the work of man. You strive to distinguish the ceiling as little as the canopy of heaven. You lose your way in St. Peter's, you take a walk in it, and ramble till you are quite tired. When divine service is performed and chanted there, you are not aware of it till you come quite close. The angels in the baptistery are monstrous giants, the doves, colossal birds of prey. You lose all idea of measurement with the eye, or proportion, and yet who does not feel his heart expand, when standing under the dome, and gazing up at it? At present a monstrous catafalque has been erected in the nave in this shape. 10. The coffin is placed in the centre under the pillars. The thing is totally devoid of taste, and yet it has a wondrous effect. The upper circle is thickly studded with lights, so are all the ornaments. The lower circle is lighted in the same way, and over the coffin hangs a burning lamp, and innumerable lights are blazing under the statues. The whole structure is more than 100 feet high, and stands exactly opposite the entrance. The guards of honor, and the Swiss, march about in the quadrangle. In every corner sits a cardinal in deep mourning, attended by his servants, who hold large burning torches, and then the singing commences with responses, in the simple and monotonous tone you no doubt remember. It is the only occasion when there is any singing in the middle of the church, and the effect is wonderful. Those who place themselves among the singers, as I do, and watch them, are forcibly impressed by the scene, for they all stand round a colossal book from which they sing, and this book is in turn lit up by a colossal torch that burns before it, while the choir are eagerly pressing forward in their vestments, in order to see and to sing properly, and Fanny with his monk's face, marking time with his hand, and occasionally joining in the chant with a stentorian voice. To watch all these different Italian faces was most interesting. One enjoyment quickly succeeds another here, and it is the same in their churches, especially in St. Peter's, where by moving a few steps the whole scene is changed. I went to the very furthest end, whence there was indeed a wonderful coup d'oeil. Through the spiral columns of the high altar, which is confessedly as high as the palace in Berlin, far beyond the space of the cupola, the whole mass of the catafalque was seen in diminished perspective, with its rows of lights, and numbers of small human beings crowding round it. When the music commences, the sounds do not reach the other end for a long time, but echo and float in the vast space, so that the most singular and vague harmonies are borne towards you. If you change your position, and place yourself right in front of the catafalque, beyond the blaze of light and the brilliant pageantry, you have the dusky cupola replete with blue vapor. All this is quite indescribable. Such is Rome. 88. This has become a long letter, so I must conclude. It will reach you on Christmas Day. May you all enjoy it happily. I send each of you presents, which are to be dispatched 2 days hence, and will arrive in time for the anniversary of your silver wedding day. Many glad festivals are thus crowded together, and I scarcely know whether to imagine myself with you today, and to wish you, dear father, all possible happiness, or to arrive with my letter at Christmas, and not to be allowed by my mother to pass through the room with the Christmas tree. I am afraid I must be contented with thinking of you. Farewell all. May you be happy. Felix. I have just received your letter, which brings me the intelligence of Gertie's illness. What I personally feel at this news I cannot express. This whole evening his words, "I must try to keep all right till your return," have sounded continually in my ears, to the exclusion of every other thought. When he is gone, Germany will assume a very different aspect for artists. I have never thought of Germany without feeling heartfelt joy and pride that Gertie lived there, and the rising generation seem for the most part so weakly and feeble, that it makes my heart sink within me. He is the last, and with him closes a happy prosperous period for us. This year ends in solemn sadness. Rome, December 20th, 1830. In my former letter I told you of the more serious aspect of Roman life, but as I wish to describe to you how I live, I must now tell you of the gaieties that have prevailed during this week. Today we have the most genial sunshine, a blue sky, and a transparent atmosphere, and on such days I have my own mode of passing my time. I work hard till 11 o'clock, and from that hour till dark, I do nothing but breathe the air. For the first time, for some days past, we yesterday had fine weather. After therefore working for a time in the morning at Solomon, I went to the Monte Pincio, where I rambled about the whole day. The effect of this exhilarating air is quite magical, and when I arose today, and again saw bright sunshine, I exulted in the thoughts of the entire idleness I was again about to indulge in. The whole world is on foot, revelling in a December spring. Every moment you meet some acquaintance, with whom you lounge about for a time, then leave him, and once more enjoy your solitary reverie. There are swarms of handsome faces to be seen. As the sun declines, the appearance of the whole landscape, and every hue, undergo a change. When the Ave Maria sounds, it is time to go to the church of Trinita dei Monti, where French nuns sing, and it is charming to hear them. I declare to heaven that I am become quite tolerant, and listen to bad music with edification, but what can I do? The composition is positively ridiculous, the organ playing even more absurd. But it is twilight, and the whole of the small bright church is filled with persons kneeling, lit up by the sinking sun each time that the door is opened. Both the singing nuns have the sweetest voices in the world, quite tender and touching, more especially when one of them sings the responses in her melodious voice, which we are accustomed to hear chanted by priests in a loud, harsh, monotonous tone. The impression is very singular. Moreover, it is well known that no one is permitted to see the fair singers, so this caused me to form a strange resolution. I have composed something to suit their voices, which I observed very minutely, and I mean to send it to them. There are several modes to which I can have recourse to accomplish this. That they will sing it, I feel quite assured, and it will be pleasant for me to hear my chant performed by persons whom I never saw, especially as they must in turn sing it to the Barbaro Tedesco, whom they also never beheld. I am charmed with this idea. The text is in Latin, a prayer to Mary. Does not this notion please you? After church I walk again on the hill until it is quite dark, when Madame Vernet and her daughter, and pretty Madame V., for whose acquaintance I have to thank Rosaile, are much admired by us Germans, and we form groups round them, or follow, or walk beside them. The background is formed by haggard painters with terrific beards. They smoke tobacco on the Monte Pincio, whistle to their huge dogs, and enjoy the sunset in their own way. As I am in a frivolous mood today, I must relate to you, dear sisters, every particular of a ball I lately attended, and where I danced with a degree of zeal I never did before. I had spoken a few fair words to the maître de danse, who stands in the middle here, and regulates everything. Consequently he allowed the gallop to continue for more than half an hour, so I was in my element, and pleasantly conscious that I was dancing in the Palazzo Albani, in Rome, and also with the prettiest girl in it, according to the verdict of the competent judges, Thorwaldsen, Vernet, etc. The way in which I became acquainted with her is also an anecdote of Rome. I was at Tarlonia's first ball, though not dancing, as I knew none of the ladies present, but merely looking at the people. Suddenly some one tapped me on the shoulder, saying, "So you also are admiring the English beauty, I am quite dazzled." It was Thorwaldsen himself standing at the door, lost in admiration. Scarcely had he said this, when we heard a torrent of words behind us. Mais ou est-elle donc, cette petite Anglaise? Ma femme aimée envoie pour la regarder. Per Bacco! It was quite clear that this little thin Frenchman, with stiff, grey hair, and the ribbon of the Legion of Honour, must be Horace Vernet. He now discussed the youthful beauty with Thorwaldsen, in the most earnest and scientific manner, and it was quite a pleasure to me to see these two old masters admiring the young girl together, while she was dancing away, quite unconcerned. They were then presented to her parents, but I felt very insignificant, as I could not join in the conversation. A few days afterwards, however, I was with some acquaintances whom I knew through the Atwoods, at Venice, they having invited me for the purpose of presenting me to some of their friends, and these friends turned out to be the very persons I have been speaking of, so your son and brother was highly delighted.